But that's what happens when a leader just goes slightly bonkers. People get obsessed by their dislike for that leader, and they tend not to be able to see any longer the good things that leader has done.
Let's turn to Donald Trump and his 20-minute address to the nation yesterday, reflecting on his achievements of the past year. With the backdrop of his falling approval ratings, he used that speech to remind Americans how far they've come since he returned to office.
Evening, America. 11 months ago, I inherited a mess, and I'm fixing it. 1 year ago, our country was dead. We were absolutely dead. Our country was ready to fail. Totally failed. Now, we're the hottest country anywhere in the world.
What are we to make of that, Matthew? Are they the hottest country anywhere in the world? America's kind of always the hottest country anywhere in the world.
Yes, yeah. I don't think that the politics of telling people that things are going well when they don't feel that things are going well is very sensible. It's like constantly telling people that crime is falling, which it is, but they don't want to believe it, and they won't be told. And I think that Trump, almost by reflex, can't help boasting of his success, now perhaps at a time when he needs to acknowledge that he's met some problems.
But I mean, he has met some problems, but the American economy is healthier than a lot of other people's economies. It's certainly healthier than ours. Is he wrong that he's got things to boast about, Julia?
He has a few things to boast about. I mean, he did secure the southern border of the US. That was a huge problem for the country.
Yeah.
He's got, for all it's worth, he's got defence spending up in Europe further than it was before. And, I think I think what he did in Iran was pretty successful. But no, I think that, when it comes to the trade war was pretty disastrously waged. I don't think it was necessarily wrong directionally to do something of that kind, but he basically had to back down on every front. And inflation is still a bit above where people want it to be. So, I think, it's not in Trump's nature. When does Trump ever back down and say, oh, well, very occasionally he might say it didn't go quite how we wanted it to go, but that's not his style. He's a kind of tribal leader. He needs to whip up the troops to feel good, and that's how he communicates with people. So, from absolutely dead to the hottest in the world. I don't know what the chemistry of that is, but that's the
rapid
way.
It's rapid decomposition, isn't it? I think it's when things have a half-life. I mean, pretty much every figure he gave in that speech about what the economy's doing and what's up and what's down was wrong, to be fair. And as ever with Trump, one never knows whether he knows they're wrong or he's just chosen to sort of believe them. He thanked his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, at the end of the speech, who he credited with encouraging him to do the speech. There was an interview in Vanity Fair this week. She was interviewed alongside other people, and she basically said that she told him that more talks about the domestic economy and less about Saudi Arabia is probably called for. You wondered, does he care about the domestic economy? Does he notice the domestic economy?
To the extent that he's a sentient human being, and I begin to doubt it sometimes. I think he does know that people care about the economy. Hence this particular speech. And Susan Wiles, isn't it? He got her name wrong. He called her Susan Trump.
He did the other day,
in a speech
yes.
a little while ago. I honestly think he's finished.
Right.
I think he's losing it, and I think America thinks he's losing it.
I can never make my mind up when he speaks and he rambles on in that way. And you were very funny about this in your notebook this week, Matthew. You talked about him talking about, he disputed the fact that he said we don't really call her the chief of staff anymore because we can't talk about chiefs because the Indians don't like it. And you're like, what are you talking about? Yes. I can never really decide whether I think this is a man who's losing his mind, as you suggest, or just a bit like me when I'm on the radio too long and I just start to gabble. I mean, there's a chance it's just the latter, isn't there? No,
if you ever feel you're losing your thread, it's because you're tired, Hugo, and you just need a good night's sleep.
He must be tired.
No, I don't think a good night's sleep would make any difference to Trump.
He blamed the Democrats for the affordability crisis, and he says the affordability crisis is the reason why his approval ratings are so bad. Is that true?
I think the inflation is due to basically COVID stimulus going into economies that were massively constrained in what they could produce.
That was him.
It was partly him, and then you did have a big stimulus from Biden, which probably added to the issue. I mean, actually, a lot of the Biden stimulus, or the principle behind it, was the right thing to do in the sense of trying to raise production and supply within the US. But the amount of money, the speed at which it was thrown out, and with possibly dubiously targeted, probably didn't help. So I think you can argue that both of them have contributed, I would say, to the problem.
Well, that brings us on very nicely to my column in the paper this morning. So cue Jacob Rees-Mogg.
And I would strongly recommend Hugo Rifkin in the Times today.
Yeah, see, some weeks that seems true and some weeks not so much. I've been writing about Trump derangement syndrome, otherwise known as TDS, which is often discussed as people who have an irrational dislike of Donald Trump. And he himself accused the late director of Spinal Tap and A Few Good Men and other things, Rob Reiner, who was horribly killed earlier this week. Trump's first response was to accuse him of basically said the reason why he died was because he was such a severe sufferer of TDS. And it was a sort of appalling thing to say, to respond to the horrific killing of somebody by basically slagging him off, but entirely keeping with Trump's character. And there are so many things that Trump does that really sort of display his character, even before we get to policy. And sort of no one ever seems to call it out in America. People seem to be frightened of calling it out. And in the column, which is a quite sort of tongue-in-cheek column, but I'm sort of saying, like, is it deranged to point this out and keep pointing out, or is it perhaps more deranged to not do?
I mean, you provide a wonderful list.
It's a long list
of things that we might be said to be deranged about, and we're plainly not deranged about. And that business with Reiner, there's a terrible mistake for him to say that, and Americans won't like it.
And he doubled down. But I mean,
Yeah,
any criticism of Trump is understood, not just portrayed, but understood by Trump as deranged. Whether you criticise him for his language over somebody like Reiner, whether you point out he hasn't really ended the wars that he said he was going to end, whether you point out that his staff, as per that interview in Vanity Fair we were talking about, his staff basically do describe a madhouse. Point out any bit of this and you're deemed deranged. It just irritates me, Juliet.
That's probably how Trump uses it. I take a different definition of Trump derangement syndrome, which is where people cannot engage with the point that the man makes because they hate him so much, even where he is correct on NATO spending, on China, on the borders.
Good point.
On American industrial production,
but he's only
on
ever,
Iran.
But he's only ever irrelevantly correct.
That's not true. No, those are all the things I just listed are major, policy changes with often with bombs behind them, or fences or whatever. These are physical changes in the world that he's brought about, and that in most of those cases I think he was correct to do. So yes, I think there's a derangement syndrome. You're right. He's a vile character. He says awful stuff. He's clearly on the make with his crypto and his family and his, and he's crass and he's disgusting in lots of ways. But to me, Trump derangement syndrome is where you can't see past that to some of the stuff he's doing that you should actually agree with.
Yes, but that's what happens when a leader just goes slightly bonkers. People get obsessed by their dislike for that leader, and they tend not to be able to see any longer the good things that leader has done, and any good leader will have done some good things. He is responsible for Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, we who believed in remaining in the European Union were called Brexit derangement, suffering from Brexit derangement syndrome. Well, we look what's happened now.
I think
what has happened?
I mean, I think they're linked as well. Like, I think he does these sort of massive things for the same reason that he's such an unpredictable character. Like the borders are great. The sealing of the border is a great example. Like in some respects, that's of course that's worked because people aren't crossing the border anymore. In other respects, well, they've got like sort of tens of thousands of people in jail. They've got people they've got people roaming around dragging people from their cars at traffic lights. Only a borderline mad president would do that. The fact that it works, I mean, is sort of. it's only happened because his personality is so unhinged, and the fact that it works it's a product of that.
Perhaps the conclusion is that mad people drive other people mad.
Well, sure. I think that's a great conclusion.
I think if that's unhinged, we could do with a bit more unhinged over here, because the response to every problem here is, oh, no, you can't possibly do that.
Yes.
That's beyond the pale. So we don't solve any problems. So...
But it's hard. I mean, the borders thing, it's half done. They don't know how to get these people out of the jails. They don't know where to send them. They can't send them all to El Salvador. They can't surely have people dragging people from their cars at traffic lights forever. It's a
maybe they'll do a deal with Rwanda.
What, send them all? Maybe they will. The latest one, anyway, just before we move on from this morning, I don't know if you've seen this. So every president has a portrait in the White House. They're all kind of sort of lined up. The news this morning that the portrait of Joe Biden doesn't have Joe Biden there. It's got an auto pen, which is the thing, the stamp that you do signatures with, and has a long sort of brass plaque underneath, which talks about how he was the worst president ever who was fraudulently elected in 2020. This is the tribute put up to the man in the White House. It's just nuts, isn't it?
My old secretary, when I was a member of Parliament, we were dealing with letters from our constituents, and I was complaining that most of the letters seemed to come from mad women, and there were much more mad women writing to us than mad men. She paused only momentarily, and she said, yes, men drive them mad.
Well, I mean, that leads us very neatly on to what I next wanted to talk about, which is Melania Trump, because she has a new documentary about her return to the White House in 2025. It's coming out soon. It's promising exclusive footage and unprecedented access to the White House. Here's the trailer. Fascinated by Melania Trump. Will you be watching this, Juliet?
Yeah, I think I might, actually. I think she's great, just as a presence, in the photos. Everyone's smiling. Melania is impassive. There's no change on her
Does she know she's there?
Yeah.
Yes.
She looks a mix of confused and disgusted at every moment you see her on camera. I think the question about this documentary is what's the commercial play here? Because I don't think Melania wants to be on camera giving you footage you've never seen before. So where's she taking this in her business empire?
Yeah, it's branding, I think. Don't you think? Yeah. Obviously, Matthew, there are which I'll ask you to express carefully about precisely what their relationship is.
Yes.
Indeed, the Queen is known to have expressed them herself before her death. Yes. Do you not remember this?
Queen?
Queen Elizabeth II.
Gosh, yes.
Yes, there was quite a story about that.
There's a shaft of honesty about her, I think.
About Melania?
Yes, which not the Queen, which just peeps through from time to time.